Hey there! Tonight, the listener is invited to drift back. Not to palaces, not to marble temples glowing under a Mediterranean sun, but to something older. To a time when the world was half-formed, and the air itself trembled with memory. A time of gods, monsters, and mortals, who stumbled through creation like sparks through ash. The storyteller's voice moves like a tide, calm, steady, ancient. It says there will be no hurry tonight. Only the long unraveling of myth, from the first shiver of chaos to the cold stillness of Rome's crumbling streets. So the lights dim. The room goes quiet. Somewhere unseen the gods begin to whisper. Before there was anything, before stone, sea, or sound, there was chaos. Not the noisy kind of chaos filled with shouting and war, but the vast silent sort. A void without form, without direction, a breath before the first heartbeat. From that stillness something stirred. Out of the emptiness came Gaia, the earth herself, wide-hipped and endless, the body upon which everything would one day stand. She was the first to be solid, the first to bear weight. Beneath her formed Tartarus, the depth where darkness pooled like ink. And then came Eros, not the playful cherub of later paintings, but the raw pull of attraction itself, a force that bound what had once been separate. From this strange trinity, earth, depth, and desire, sprang the rest, night and darkness, day and light, all born from the meeting of nothing and everything. And then Gaia gave birth to Uranus, the sky. He arched over her like a canopy of silver stars, and their union filled the world with possibility. From them came the Titans, 12 in all, 6 daughters, 6 sons, vast beings of sea and flame, memory and law. But creation rarely comes without pain. Uranus looked upon his children and saw only threat. Their strength unsettled him, their size offended him. So he did what fearful fathers do. He tried to hide them. He shoved them back inside Gaia, burying them within her belly, pressing their thunderous forms into the dark. The earth groaned beneath the weight of her own children. In her agony, she forged a weapon, a sickle of jagged stone, and whispered to the ones still trapped. One by one they refused to act, until the youngest, Cronus, took up the blade. When the sky descended again to lie upon the earth, Cronus leapt. In one terrible motion, he cut his father down. Blood rained on the soil. From that crimson storm rose strange creatures, the Erinyes, the giants, and the pale-skinned Meliae. And from the foam where Uranus's body fell into the sea rose something unthinkably beautiful. Aphrodite, born from violence, crowned in sea foam, love itself stepping out of ruin. Cronus became Lord of the Cosmos. For a time the world was golden. Men lived without sorrow. No winter, no hunger, no need for prayer. Yet even paradise trembles before prophecy. Uranus's dying curse whispered that Cronus too would be overthrown by his own child. Cronus listened and did what fear always commands. He swallowed his children whole. One by one, as his sister wife Rhea gave birth, he devoured them. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each vanished into the dark of his stomach, trapped but alive. Rhea's grief hardened into defiance. When her 6th child came, a boy, she wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and handed it to Cronus. He swallowed it without question. The real child, Zeus, was hidden in a cave on the island of Crete. There, raised by nymphs and a goat named Amalthea, the boy grew strong. He learned the world through stories, the siblings imprisoned in their father's belly, the curse that haunted their bloodline. And when he came of age, he returned, clever and silent, disguised among Cronus's servants. With the help of Gaia, Zeus poured a potion into his father's cup, a burning volcanic draft that twisted inside Cronus's gut. The Titan king convulsed and vomited up his children, full-grown and furious, along with the stone that had fooled him. For the first time, the Olympians stood together. They did not beg, they did not kneel, they prepared for war. The Titanomachy lasted 10 years. Titans on one side, Olympians on the other. The earth split, mountains cracked, and the sea swallowed itself again and again. For a decade, thunder and flame became the world's only language. At first, the Titans held the advantage, older, stronger, vast as continents. But the gods were cunning. Zeus descended into Tartarus, freeing the monstrous Hecatoncheires, giants with 100 arms each, and the one-eyed Cyclopes, masters of fire and forge. In gratitude, they gave Zeus his thunderbolt, Poseidon his trident, and Hades his helm of darkness. Armed with these gifts, the young gods turned the tide. Zeus's bolts split the sky, Poseidon's trident shook the sea, and Hades moved unseen among enemies, spreading terror with whispers. Cronus fell. The Titans were chained and cast into Tartarus, guarded by the 100-handed giants. Only a few were spared: Themis, goddess of law, and Prometheus, who had quietly aided Zeus. The war ended, and the world sighed. The brothers drew lots to divide creation. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the underworld. The earth itself was left shared, perhaps because none wanted the burden of it. And so began the age of the Olympians. On Olympus, the new gods built their thrones. Zeus ruled with thunder, Poseidon with tide, and Hades with silence. Hera became queen, proud and sharp-tongued, her beauty matched only by her bitterness. Demeter tended the fields, Hestia the hearth. Athena, born from Zeus's own head, strode fully armed into the world, intellect and war bound in one. The pantheon grew. Apollo and Artemis, radiant twins of sun and moon. Ares, blood-hot and reckless. Aphrodite, soft and cruel. Hermes, the quick-tongued trickster. Hephaestus, the lame forger of wonders. And Dionysus, laughing god of wine and madness. They ruled from a mountain wrapped in cloud, but they were never far from earth. They quarreled, seduced, cursed, and blessed. They were divine, but never distant. Their stories shaped everything that followed. Prometheus, who had helped Zeus in the war, watched the silent world below and felt pity. The mountains and rivers were beautiful but empty. So he shaped figures from clay, fragile, upright, curious, and breathed life into them. Humans. Zeus was unimpressed. "They look like us," he said, "but they are weak." "Then let them learn," Prometheus replied. "They should worship, not learn." But the Titans saw their shivering bodies, their dark caves, their fear of the cold. He stole fire from Olympus, hiding a glowing coal inside a hollow fennel stalk, and gave it to mankind. The night changed forever. Flames flickered in the darkness, warming hands, baking bread, forging tools. Humanity glowed for the first time. Zeus, seeing this rebellion, was enraged. He chained Prometheus to a cliff in the Caucasus, where an eagle tore out his liver each day, only for it to grow back by night. But Prometheus endured. Even in agony, he smiled at the rising smoke from mortal fires. Zeus then fashioned his revenge upon humanity. From clay, Hephaestus sculpted a woman perfect and curious. The gods gifted her beauty, charm, wit, and an irresistible sense of wonder. They named her Pandora. She was given a jar and one command: do not open it. But curiosity is stronger than obedience. One day Pandora lifted the lid, and from it poured all the world's miseries: disease, envy, sorrow, greed. The air filled with invisible wings of pain. Horrified, she slammed it shut, trapping one last thing inside: hope. And so, humanity learned to live with both. By the time Zeus had secured his place on Olympus, thunder had become the language of authority. The storms that once symbolized war now echoed law. Each flash of lightning was a reminder the old world of Titans had fallen, and the age of the Olympians was not to be questioned. But peace on Olympus was as fragile as glass. Power breeds unrest, and gods, for all their immortality, were not immune to envy. Zeus ruled the skies and storms, but even he couldn't control his own impulses. His lightning struck mortals and goddesses alike, and from those encounters came half-divine children destined to blur the line between heaven and earth. Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, watched this with eyes like polished bronze. She had endured betrayal, humiliation, and the endless gossip of Olympus. Yet she remained seated beside Zeus, her crown steady, her voice sharp enough to slice thunder. Hers was not the love of tenderness, but of endurance, a devotion carved from fury and pride. Their union was less marriage and more treaty, a binding of necessity. Zeus brought storms, Hera brought order. Together they represented the balance of heaven law and chaos, passion and retribution. But beneath the clouds, their quarrels shaped mortal lives. When Zeus turned his gaze toward Io, a priestess devoted to Hera, the queen's wrath was immediate. To protect the girl from his wife's suspicion, Zeus transformed Io into a gleaming white cow. Hera, unimpressed by the disguise, demanded the cow as a gift. Trapped by his own deceit, Zeus agreed. Hera placed Argus Panoptes, the 100-eyed giant, to guard Io day and night. Desperate, Zeus sent Hermes to free her. The messenger lulled Argus to sleep with music and then struck him dead. Hera, mourning her servant, took his eyes and placed them on the tail of the peacock, a symbol of her watchful rage. Then, to punish Io further, she sent a gadfly to sting her endlessly. The cursed girl wandered the earth, crossing deserts, seas, and continents. Her path left marks upon maps the Ionian Sea, the Bosporus scars of divine jealousy, written onto geography itself. Another tale whispered through Olympus was that of Leto, a titaness who bore Zeus's children. Hera cursed her so that no land under the sun would give her refuge to give birth. Homeless and hunted, Leto drifted across the sea until she reached the floating island of Delos, a land unanchored and therefore beyond Hera's decree. There she gave birth to twins, Artemis and Apollo. When Artemis was born, she immediately helped her mother deliver her brother, becoming goddess of childbirth and protector of the innocent. Apollo rose radiant, golden, his voice already strung with music. Their births were not just divine events, they were revolutions. The moon and sun had found their forms, and the balance of light and shadow began its eternal dance. Hera's vengeance, however, never ended with birth. Semele, another mortal beloved by Zeus, was deceived by Hera disguised as an old woman. She whispered poison into the girl's ear. If your lover is truly Zeus, let him show you his divine form. Semele, naive and trusting, made the fatal request. Zeus, bound by oath, revealed his true radiance. The light incinerated her instantly, but from her ashes Zeus salvaged their unborn son, sewing him into his own thigh until he was ready to be born Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, and madness. And so it went. The loves of Zeus gave rise to demigods, heroes, and legends: Perseus, Heracles, Helen of Troy. But each affair carried a shadow. Hera's rage. The queen of the gods never struck Zeus directly. Instead, she turned her fury toward his mortal lovers and their children. She was a storm that found the innocent first. Still, Hera remained, not out of submission but out of necessity. Her power was woven into the very fabric of Olympus. She represented permanence in a world of whim, structure in a court of chaos. Athena, meanwhile, watched all this from a distance, poised, quiet, and unbothered by the dramas of her divine family. Born fully armored from Zeus's skull, she embodied wisdom in its purest form. Thought turned to action. It was Athena who guided cities, who whispered invention into the ears of mortals, who taught strategy instead of slaughter. Where Ares reveled in bloodshed, Athena planned. She turned war into a form of intelligence, not impulse. When a new city rose from the rocky shores of Greece, two gods stepped forward to claim it: Poseidon, lord of the sea, and Athena, goddess of wisdom. To decide the city's patron, they offered gifts to its people: Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and from the earth sprang a magnificent fountain of salt water. The people admired it but could not drink it. Athena knelt, pressed her fingers into the soil, and from that touch grew the first olive tree, shade, food, oil, peace. Her gift was not thunderous, but it endured. The city was named Athens, and under her watch it would become the cradle of reason and art. But even wisdom is not immune to pride. There was once a young woman named Arachne, whose weaving was so precise that her tapestries seemed alive. When praised, she denied Athena's guidance, claiming her skill surpassed the goddess's own. Athena appeared in disguise, warning her, but the girl only laughed. So Athena revealed herself and challenged her to a contest. The goddess wove scenes of divine glory, Arachne of divine shame, the lies, affairs, and cruelties of Olympus. Her work was flawless, her truth unbearable. In fury and sorrow, Athena transformed her into the first spider, doomed to weave forever, a warning that talent without humility turns beauty into curse. And yet, even as she punished pride, Athena inspired it. Athens thrived under her gaze, its marble columns, its debates, its art, all built from the quiet conviction that wisdom, not power, defined civilization. Far from the city's hum, Apollo and Artemis roamed. Born of the same mother, they ruled different halves of existence. Apollo, radiant with sun and song, Artemis, veiled in moonlight and solitude. When Apollo slew the serpent Python, he built the oracle of Delphi on its bones, a place where mortals came seeking truth and left with riddles. His light healed and burned in equal measure. He could bless with music or curse with silence. Artemis, in contrast, was the untamed wild. Her arrows struck swiftly and without hesitation. When a mortal hunter named Actaeon stumbled upon her bathing, she transformed him into a stag, and his own hounds tore him apart. Her purity was not fragility, it was sovereignty. Together, the twins embodied the balance of nature, light and dark, order and instinct. But even as the gods ruled, humanity began to change. The first men of the Golden Age, pure and kind, gave way to those of silver, then bronze, stronger, prouder, crueler. Wars erupted, greed festered, and reverence faded. Zeus watched as mortals forgot the gods who had shaped them. His patience, once endless, thinned like smoke. He called upon Poseidon. The sea god answered with thunder in his eyes. Together they cleansed the earth. The rain began softly, then never stopped. Rivers swelled, mountains drowned. Cities vanished beneath gray waves. It was the great flood, the gods' unmaking of mankind. Only two souls survived, Deucalion and Pyrrha, descendants of Prometheus and Pandora. They floated in a wooden chest as the world dissolved beneath them. When the waters receded, they stood on Mount Parnassus, surrounded by silence. They prayed to Themis, goddess of law, asking how to repopulate the earth. The oracle answered, "Cover your heads, walk down the mountain, and cast the bones of your mother behind you." At first, they wept, thinking the command cruel. Then they understood their mother was the earth, and her bones were the stones beneath their feet. They obeyed. The stones thrown by Deucalion became men. Those cast by Pyrrha became women. Humanity was reborn humbler, wiser, tempered by loss. As centuries passed, heroes rose from among them, half divine, half doomed. Their stories were born from both glory and punishment, as if the gods themselves could not resist shaping mortals into mirrors of their own contradictions. Perseus, born of prophecy and sea foam, was one such hero. Sent to slay Medusa, he carried Athena's polished shield, Hermes' winged sandals, and Hades' invisible helm. He crept through the shadowed cave, guided only by reflection. One strike and the Gorgon fell. From her blood leapt Pegasus, the winged horse beauty born from terror once again. Then came Heracles, son of Zeus and bane of Hera. Driven mad by the goddess's wrath, He killed his own family and sought redemption through 12 impossible labors, slaying lions, capturing monsters, cleaning stables with rivers. Each trial broke him, remade him, and carved him closer to immortality. And Theseus, Prince of Athens, who entered the labyrinth to face the Minotaur. Guided by Ariadne's thread, he slew the beast, only to abandon her on an island later, a reminder that even heroes stumble when pride leads the way. Every victory in Greek myth carries a cost. Every triumph leaves a scar. The gods demand balance always. At the edge of all these stories stood the Fates, 3 sisters weaving the threads of existence. Clotho spun the thread, Lachesis measured its length, and Atropos cut it. Not even Zeus could defy them. Theirs was the only law older than Olympus. Through their loom passed the lives of kings and beggars, gods and men alike. The heroes might slay monsters, but they could not slay destiny. And destiny in time would shift from marble Olympus to the brick and smoke of Rome. The world turned. Temples changed names. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Athena became Minerva, but their essence remained. The myths aged like stone, reshaped but never erased. And so began another kind of story, one not of gods above, but of mortals below. The narrator's tone softens, darker now, as though the centuries themselves are pressing closer. "Congratulations," it says quietly, "you've woken up in ancient Rome. Not the Rome of marble emperors or golden palaces, the other Rome, the one that smells of sweat, sewage, and survival. You are not a senator, nor a soldier. You are a plebeian, a laborer, a nameless cog in the empire's endless machine. The walls around you are wood and clay. The ceiling droops. The room is barely wide enough to turn around in. Outside, someone is shouting, always shouting, and the street stinks of rot, oil, and something you don't want to name. This is not a dream. This is a day in Rome. Congratulations. You've woken up in ancient Rome, though woken up might be generous. You didn't really sleep. You drifted, half-conscious, listening to the chorus of 1,000 restless lives stacked on top of each other. The coughing, the creaking, the muffled argument in the room below, someone's baby crying, someone's chamber pot being emptied out the window. You're not in a palace. You're not even in a house. You live in an insular Rome's version of an apartment building. 6, sometimes 7 stories high, built from wood, clay, and the sheer confidence that gravity will behave. It leans slightly to one side, but no one cares as long as it still stands. Your room is small enough that if you lie diagonally, your feet touch one wall and your head brushes the other. The ceiling is low, stained with smoke, the air thick with the smell of sweat and damp straw. A single crack in the wall lets in a thread of light and, unfortunately, the sound of the street carts rolling, vendors shouting, dogs barking. You share the space with 2 others. One is snoring, the other is awake, staring at the ceiling, probably calculating if today's wages will cover tomorrow's bread. You stand up carefully, avoiding the slick patch on the floor. You don't want to know what it is. There's no window, no ventilation, no privacy, and yet this is home. Outside, the street is already alive. Voices rise and echo off the narrow walls, a living, breathing chaos. Vendors hawk olives, cheap wine, fried fish, and dreams. The cobblestones glisten with something that is definitely not rain. Rome smells like smoke, oil, and sewage, a perfume no emperor could bottle, but every citizen knows. You step carefully because the gutters run open here, carrying yesterday's waste. People dump chamber pots straight into the street, shouting, "Cave! Watch out!" before letting it fly. Most don't bother warning. Shoes aren't a luxury. They're armor. You pull your tunic tighter. It's your only one, rough wool, patched too many times to count. The fabric scratches, but it's better than nothing. There's no laundry here. Clothes are washed in public basins with urine. Yes, actual urine. Collected in jars from street corners and sold for cleaning. The ammonia bleaches stains better than soap. Your breakfast, if it can be called that, is a crust of bread from yesterday. You dip it in watered-down wine because the water alone might kill you. A faint sourness hits your tongue, vinegar and age. But it's safer than trusting the public fountain. The water that flows through Rome's aqueducts starts pure in the hills, but picks up everything, dust, metal, parasites by the time it reaches the slums. If you're lucky, you find work today. Maybe hauling bricks for one of the emperor's endless construction projects. Maybe carrying amphorae of wine for a merchant who won't remember your name. The forum is where laborers gather each morning, waiting to be chosen. It's a silent competition of posture, stand straight, look strong, don't cough. Weakness means hunger. If you're hired, you'll work until the sun burns white overhead. There are no breaks, no water unless you steal it. You lift until your arms shake and your legs give out. If you fall, someone steps over you. And yet, for all its cruelty, the city moves with rhythm, the clatter of carts, the hiss of the baker's oven, the distant hum of the amphitheater. Rome never stops. It devours the living to keep its heart beating. At midday, the sun is merciless. The stones reflect the heat upward, and the air tastes like dust and metal. You duck into a narrow alley where the shadows cling, grateful for even a moment's reprieve. Lunch is more bread, maybe some beans or a handful of olives if fortune smiles. Meat is for festivals, cheese for those above your pay. You've heard rumors that the emperor eats peacock tongues and roasted dormice stuffed with honey. You've never seen either, but the rumor is enough to make you laugh. The rich feast, the poor chew. If you have a few coins left, you might visit a thermopolium, a street-side food stall. The smell of hot lentil stew fills the air, mixed with frying oil and sweat. You hand over your copper coin, take the bowl, and eat standing. The stew is thick, gray, and just salty enough to mask the taste of water that shouldn't be there. The man beside you slurps his share, then spits a pebble into the street. You both shrug. It's just Rome. When work ends, you don't rest. You queue at the public fountain, waiting for your turn to fill a clay jar with water for the night. Around you, children splash, women gossip, someone argues about taxes. The fountain spout is shaped like a lion's head, the water spilling from its mouth. It looks noble until you remember that this same water just passed through half the city. If you're brave or simply filthy enough, you head for the balneae, the public baths. They're everywhere in Rome, from tiny corner rooms to sprawling marble palaces funded by emperors. The air inside is thick with steam, sweat, and conversation. The rich soak in perfumed pools. You stick to the cheap ones where the floors are cracked and the water is murky. You strip down, leave your clothes with an attendant, and step into the frigidarium, the cold room before moving toward the tepidarium, then the caldarium, where the heat feels like fire. You rub olive oil on your skin, scrape it off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil, and pretend it's cleansing. The oil runs black with grime. Around you, men gossip about politics and gladiators. A merchant brags about his new villa. Someone tells a story about a senator's mistress. You don't speak, you listen. It's safer that way. The water isn't clean, but for a brief moment, you feel human again. When you leave the baths, the sky is bleeding orange over the rooftops. The air cools, and torches flicker along the streets. Rome changes after dark. The respectable citizens retreat to their villas, and the rest of the city exhales. Music drifts from taverns. Laughter mixes with shouting. Somewhere a woman sings off-key, and a fight breaks out near the wine stalls. You pass through it all, invisible, a shadow among thousands. Your insula looms ahead tall, crooked, swaying slightly in the evening breeze. You climb the stairs carefully, counting each creak. The higher you go, the cheaper the rent and the greater the risk. Fires start often here. All it takes is one overturned lamp, one spark in the wrong place, and the whole building becomes an inferno. At the top, your door is a curtain. Behind it, darkness. You light a small oil lamp and sit. The flame flickers weakly, barely strong enough to cast shadows. You eat what's left of your bread, drink the last of the watered wine, and lie down. The walls groan. The floor trembles. The rats are awake. Sleep doesn't come easily. The city outside hums wheels on cobblestones, laughter, the crack of distant thunder. You think about the gods, about Jupiter and Juno, about what they must see when they look down at Rome. Maybe they don't look at all. Morning comes early. The air is already hot, heavy with the scent of ash and humanity. You rise stiff, stretch, and prepare to repeat the cycle. The city waits for no one. But as you step outside, something catches your eye, a shrine, small and worn, built into the wall at the street corner. A clay lamp burns before a statue of Mercury, god of travelers and thieves. Someone has left a coin, another a piece of bread. You add a crumb from your pocket, not because you believe it will change anything, but because habit is the only prayer the poor can afford. Religion in Rome is not quiet. It's everywhere in the smoke of sacrifices, the chants in the temples, the laughter during festivals. The gods are part of the air itself. You don't love them. You fear them. There's Jupiter, who commands storms, Juno, who guards marriage, Mars, the god of war, pacing restlessly like a wolf, Vesta, whose sacred flame must never die, and countless others, gods of doors, crossroads, rivers, even mildew. Each day brings a ritual, each season a festival. There are so many that no one remembers them all. But forget to bow, forget to offer, and the blame falls hard. Bad harvest? Someone angered Ceres. Illness? Someone offended Apollo. Flood? Clearly Poseidon's temper. You don't question it. In a world this fragile, you cling to whatever explanation makes the chaos bearable. At night you sometimes dream of the afterlife of the underworld ruled by Pluto, where shades wander endlessly along the river Styx. It isn't a place of fire, not even punishment. It's a dim echo of life, a silence that goes on forever. You imagine it's peaceful, at least compared to the streets above. But death in Rome is not peace for everyone. The rich are cremated in marble tombs, their names carved in stone. The poor people like you are thrown into puticuli, mass graves outside the city, no markers, no prayers, just lime poured over the bodies to keep the smell from reaching the living. You don't think about that for long. The sun rises and the hunger returns. Life demands attention. Some nights, though, you catch glimpses of beauty, fleeting moments that feel almost divine. A shaft of moonlight between buildings, the laughter of children chasing each other through the alley, a singer in a tavern whose voice makes even the drunkest men fall quiet. Rome is cruel, but it's also alive. It breathes through you, even as it crushes you. And so, day after day, you endure through heat, hunger, labor, and noise. You live because living is the only rebellion left. You live because living is the only rebellion left. But Rome has a way of reminding you that rebellion, even quiet ones, come at a cost. The city may be alive, but its heartbeat belongs to the powerful. The law doesn't protect the poor. It watches them, waits for them to stumble. Justice here is not blind. It's bored, impatient, and almost always looking down. Imagine you're accused of stealing a loaf of bread. The man who owns the bakery swears he saw you take it. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, it doesn't matter. The accusation alone is enough. Soldiers arrive, bored and cruel. Dragging you through the streets, the crowd parts to watch, eyes filled with the dull curiosity reserved for tragedy that doesn't belong to them. You're hauled before a magistrate, a man with a gold ring and a face that looks like it hasn't smiled in years. You try to explain, but your words fall apart. He isn't listening. He's already made up his mind. A fine or flogging. And since you have no money, the whip becomes your sentence. The punishment takes place in the open, the forum. the marketplace, wherever people can see. Because punishment in Rome is not just justice, it's theater. The whip cracks, and your back opens. The crowd watches, some silent, some laughing. Blood stains the stones that once carried emperors. If you're a slave, there's no trial, no question of guilt. You're property, and property cannot be wronged. The same law that governs statues and sandals governs you. Displease your master, and the punishment is whatever he decides, a beating, a branding, a sale to a worse fate. The law is an animal with a long memory and no mercy. Even if you're free, even if you're a citizen, your chances depend on wealth, connections, and luck. A rich man can bribe his way to freedom. A poor man can't bribe a beggar. The prisons, if you can call them that, are dark holes beneath the city, built not to hold people long, but to hold them until death. The most feared of these is the Tullianum, a stone pit beneath the Capitoline Hill, cold, airless, and wet. Prisoners are chained to the walls, their names forgotten even before they die. And still, Rome calls itself civilized. At night, the city changes again. The torches flicker, the streets empty, the smell of oil and waste grows sharper, the poor sleep light. Thieves move like shadows. Somewhere in the distance, dogs howl. You lie awake in your room, listening to the groans of the insular wood bending, stairs creaking, a rat scuttling near your head. Your back still burns from the whip. You wonder if the gods noticed. They didn't. Because in Rome, the gods belong to the rich, too. Religion isn't comfort here. It's obligation. There's no mercy in marble, no kindness in incense. Jupiter's temples rise high above the slums, their steps polished by the feet of those who will never enter. Sacrifices are made by senators, not beggars. The gods don't need your prayers. They need your awe. You still pray, of course. Everyone does. You whisper to the household spirits, the lairs and penates, small clay figures watching from your shelf. You leave crumbs of bread and drops of wine, hoping they'll guard your home from illness and fire. It's not belief. It's habit. Fear, disguised as devotion. The temples of Rome never sleep. Even in the darkest hours, torches burn before the altars. Priests chant in Latin so old, even they barely understand it. The sacrifices are endless doves, goats, oxen, their blood pooled in basins of bronze. You've seen it. The rich call it piety. You call it a spectacle. Every festival is louder than the last. Drunken parades for Bacchus, men in wolfskins chasing women during Lupercalia, masters serving slaves during Saturnalia, pretending for one day that the world is fair. But when the wine dries and the garlands fade, everything returns to the way it was. The gods keep their distance. The people keep their faith. It's a fragile truce built on exhaustion. If the gods are silent, the empire isn't. The city itself speaks in ways that words cannot through the roar of the Colosseum, the screams of the condemned, the chanting of crowds drunk on blood. You've heard them before. You've stood outside the arena's massive gates where the air trembles with anticipation. Inside, the sand is red, the audience louder than thunder. Gladiators fight not for freedom, but for the illusion of it. And when they die, the cheers shake the sky. Sometimes criminals are thrown to the beasts, lions, bears, leopards imported from far-off lands for the amusement of those who will never know hunger. The crowd laughs when the first scream comes. The emperor watches detached, a god in flesh surrounded by perfumed air. You can't tell who's worse, the killers or the spectators. Rome calls this justice too. Days pass, weeks blur. The rhythm of suffering becomes routine. You stop counting, you stop dreaming. The city consumes you piece by piece. And yet, in the smallest moments, humanity stubbornly persists. You see it in the mother cradling her child beside the fountain, whispering lullabies older than the empire. In the boy chasing pigeons through the forum, pretending the world isn't falling apart. In the old man who carves small figurines of gods he no longer believes in, just to keep his hands busy. Even in the filth, there's a strange beauty. The smell of bread from a street stall, the sound of laughter from a tavern, the orange glow of lamps flickering against walls of cracked plaster. These are the things that make Rome bearable, the quiet defiance of the ordinary. But the city's mercy doesn't last. It never does. One evening, a fire breaks out. It starts somewhere below a spark, a lamp overturned, a gust of wind. You wake to shouting. Smoke curls through the cracks in the floor. The air turns heavy. The walls glow faintly red. You grab what little you own, a blanket, a bowl, a wooden charm of mercury, and stumble toward the stairs. Others are already running, pushing, screaming. Children cry. Someone falls. Someone doesn't get up. Outside, the night is chaos. Flames leap between buildings, devouring everything. The sky is red. Ash rains like snow. The heat presses against your skin until it blisters. You cough, stumble, find an alley that hasn't yet caught. The fire brigade arrives, but they don't rush to save. They bargain first. If you can pay, they'll douse your home. If not, they let it burn. The cries echo, but the coins speak louder. By dawn, half your street is gone. Your insula stands blackened and smoking. You sit among the ruins, your hands shaking. Everything you owned fits in your lap. Rome will rebuild, of course. It always does. But the new walls will rise over the ashes of the old, and no one will remember who lived here before. Weeks later, you grow sick. It starts with a cough, then a fever, then the weakness, the kind that makes even lifting your head feel like a battle. There are no doctors for people like you. There are healers, yes, but they cost more than food. You try herbs, prayers, hope. None work. You lie in your bed as the world outside continues without you. The city doesn't slow for the dying. You hear laughter, footsteps, the rumble of carts. Life goes on, and you are already fading. When the end comes, it's not dramatic. There's no vision of gods, no flash of divine mercy. Just a final exhale, soft and thin. The oil lamp flickers, and you are gone. Your body is found days later. They take it to the outskirts of the city, where pits gape open like mouths. There's no ceremony, no mourning, just the dull thud of earth over flesh. And that's it. You've lived and died in the greatest empire on earth, and no one will ever know your name. But maybe, just maybe, that isn't the end. Because every life, no matter how small, leaves a mark. The roads that lead across continents, the aqueducts that carry water, the temples that scrape the sky, all were built by hands like yours, by the nameless, by the forgotten. When people speak of Rome, they remember emperors Augustus, Nero, Caesar. But the truth is, the empire didn't stand on their shoulders. It stood on yours. You are the faceless laborer whose sweat darkened the stones, the mother who boiled lentils in a cracked pot, the child who carried water until your back bent. You are the reason the city breathed at all. And though history will never carve your likeness in marble, it carries your ghost in every brick. Centuries pass, the empire falls, the marble crumbles, the roads crack. But beneath it all, beneath every ruin and relic, the bones of the forgotten still whisper. They tell the same story again and again of hunger and hope, of fire and faith, of the gods who never listened and the mortals who lived anyway. Because in the end, Rome wasn't built by immortals. It was built by people who didn't have the luxury of eternity, only the stubborn, miraculous will to survive another day. And maybe that's why their story still matters. The narrator's tone shifts one last time softer, closer now, like the world has quieted to listen. You, sitting here in the modern world, with your clean water, your warm bed, your light that burns at the press of a button. You are the distant echo of those who came before. Every comfort around you, every safety, is a monument built on their suffering. When you turn on a faucet, remember the aqueducts. When you walk down a paved road, remember the hands that laid the stones. When you eat without hunger gnawing at your ribs, Remember those who starved so others could feast. You don't owe them worship, just awareness. Because they were the quiet architects of civilization, unseen, unnamed, unthanked. So tonight, as the story fades and the night grows still, take a breath and remember them. The weaver, the builder, the child who never learned to read, the slave who dared to dream of freedom. The nameless millions who built a world and were buried beneath it. Their ghosts are the dust beneath your feet, and when the wind rises, if you listen closely, you can almost hear them whisper, "We were here." And that whisper, fragile, human, eternal, is all that remains. We were here. Those words linger like smoke above a dying fire. They echo through time, crossing centuries of ruin and silence. Even after the marble cracks, even after the aqueducts crumble, that whisper doesn't fade. It lives on in the stories, in the language, in the rhythm of the cities that came after. Because nothing truly ends. Empires don't vanish. They decay into something new. The gods of Olympus became the saints of cathedrals. The forums became marketplaces, the temples became churches, and the voices of the forgotten were reborn as the voices of the ordinary, the same heartbeat pulsing through every civilization that dared to rise from dust. Rome taught the world how to build, but also how to forget. The poor who once filled its streets were swept aside like ashes, but their endurance became blueprint. Their struggles became tradition. Their pain became the foundation for progress no one would thank them for. When the empire finally began to fall, it didn't collapse in a single day. It eroded, slowly, painfully. Trade routes dried up. Plagues burned through the population. Armies once loyal to Rome turned their swords inward. The city that had conquered the world became a husk, feeding on its own grandeur. The senators still wore white togas and spoke of glory, but the streets told another story: cracked stone, empty granaries, children begging beside statues of gods that no longer answered. The aqueducts still carried water, but weeds grew between their arches. The baths, once full of laughter and steam, echoed only with dripping water and memory. And somewhere beneath the crumbling roofs of the insulae, a woman whispered a prayer to Mercury, the same one her grandmother had whispered before her. It wasn't faith anymore, it was habit. The empire was dying, but life refused to stop. Barbarians came next, though history remembers them as shadows, as invaders, as chaos. In truth, they were just people too, hungry, tired, desperate. The kind of people Rome itself had once created and abandoned. They didn't destroy the empire, they inherited its ghosts. They found its streets empty, its statues defaced, its villas hollow. They walked through temples still smelling faintly of incense and ash. They slept in the ruins, cooked their food on the altars, wore the jewelry that once belonged to senators. And as they built their fires beneath the broken columns, they must have looked up at the stars and wondered, just as the Greeks once did, what gods were watching now. Time kept moving. The marble of Rome turned gray, then brown, then dust. The Latin tongue fractured into new languages: Italian, French, Spanish, each carrying pieces of the old empire in its bones. Words like aqua, terra, vita, water, earth, life survived, like fossils of meaning buried in sound. The myths changed too. The old gods faded, but their stories were never truly buried. Zeus became Jupiter, Jupiter became a memory, and that memory became a whisper inside every story humanity told afterward. Every civilization carries its myths like scars. Centuries passed. Cathedrals rose where temples once stood. Stone masons carved angels where eagles had been. People knelt before new idols, but their prayers were the same. Give us food, keep us safe, spare our children. The city changed its name, its rulers, its gods, but never its soul. Rome remained not as an empire, but as an echo of ambition, a monument to what humans will do for power and what they'll endure just to belong to something greater than themselves. Even now, if you walk its streets, you can feel it. Beneath the hum of scooters and chatter, beneath the tourists and the cameras, there's another Rome, the old one, breathing quietly under your feet. The stones remember. The walls still carry soot from ancient fires. The air still hums with prayers whispered in a dead language. And somewhere under layers of earth, a piece of broken pottery lies beside a coin no one spent, both belonging to someone who never knew they'd one day be history. But maybe that's the real trick of time. It turns everyone into myth eventually. The slaves who built aqueducts, the soldiers who carved the empire's borders, the mothers who buried their children. They become stories, stripped of names, but not of meaning. And centuries later, we remember them without even realizing it, in the way we light candles, in the way we build roads, in the way we measure hours. Even now, as cities rise on other continents, as technology hums louder than the old hymns ever did, humanity still carries Rome's ghost and the ghost of Greece before it. Every new empire borrows from the old. Every monument is built on someone's forgotten bones. The world turns, but the story stays the same. The narrator's voice deepens, softer now, more intimate. "Look around," it says. "The gods are gone, but the rituals remain. You check your phone instead of a sundial. You draw baths with plumbing instead of buckets. You wash your hands under clean water that once had to be stolen from mountains. You live longer than the emperors who called themselves divine, yet still feel the same small ache they did, that quiet hunger for purpose, for belonging, for meaning in the noise." That's the strange inheritance Rome left behind. The need to matter. The yearning to be remembered. The impossible wish to live forever in a world that forgets so easily. And maybe that's why the old myths never died. When we tell stories of gods and heroes now, we're not reaching for them, we're reaching for ourselves. We're asking the same questions the Greeks asked under the stars, the same questions the Romans whispered into marble walls. Who made us? Why are we here? And what happens when we're gone? If you stand in the ruins of the Forum today, as the modern city hums beyond, you can almost hear the answers. Not from the gods, but from the stones themselves. They don't whisper of glory. They don't boast of empire. They murmur of footsteps, millions of them passing, fading, returning as dust. Somewhere near the Palatine Hill, where emperors once walked, wildflowers now grow through the cracks. Bees drift lazily through the air. Time has turned marble to soil, and soil to life again. The earth forgets in order to heal. And still humanity keeps building, keeps burning, keeps trying. Every generation believes it's the first to suffer, the first to conquer, the first to dream. But beneath all of it runs the same thread, the one spun by Clotho, measured by Lachesis, cut by Atropos. The same pattern that began in chaos when Gaia first opened her eyes and felt the sky pressing down upon her. It hasn't stopped since. Maybe the story of Greek gods and Roman streets isn't about power at all. Maybe it's about endurance, the quiet, unremarkable persistence of life itself, the ability to fall and rise again, no matter how many times the world ends. Imagine the city after the fall quiet, almost holy. The streets empty, the air still, no soldiers, no vendors, no laughter, just the sound of wind brushing through arches that once held banners. The statues stand half buried, their faces eroded but their eyes still watching. A single column remains upright, cutting the horizon like a finger pointing upward, as if trying to remind the sky that it once belonged to someone. And in that silence you can almost hear the heartbeat of every soul that ever lived here. The baker's laugh, the child's cry, the whisper of a woman praying to a god who never answered. All of it still lingers, somewhere between the dust and the air. The narrator pauses, almost smiling. "You survived 1,000 years in a single night," it says. "You saw gods born from chaos and mortals born from dust. You watched empires rise from blood and crumble into sand. You've walked through myth and memory and come out the other side still breathing. And that, perhaps, is the final lesson. That the difference between gods and mortals was never power. It was time. The gods had eternity to make mistakes. Mortals had only a day, and somehow they made it count. As the story fades, you're left with the soft hum of everything that came before. The hiss of the sea where Aphrodite rose, the clang of Hephaestus's forge, the murmur of Rome's fountains still flowing after all this time. You picture the faces of those forgotten, not carved in marble, but painted in light. The builders, the slaves, the poets, the mothers, the dreamers, all of them part of one endless story, looping back to the same beginning: chaos, creation, loss, rebirth. It's strange, isn't it, how every civilization tells the same tale, how from ruin comes beauty, and from beauty comes ruin again. But that's what makes it human. That's what makes it divine. Now the night grows still again. The candle flickers low. The voice that's been guiding you softens to a whisper. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls faint, ancient, familiar. Maybe it's just a storm. Or maybe it's Zeus, still reminding the world that he's watching. Either way, it's time to rest. The gods have returned to their mountains, the heroes to their graves, the streets of Rome to their silence. But the stories stay. They linger like embers beneath the ash, waiting for someone somewhere to breathe life into them again. And now that someone is you. Because every listener becomes a keeper, every keeper becomes a storyteller, and every story once told refuses to die. So close your eyes, let the myths fade into the hum of your own heartbeat. The world was chaos once, then it became sound, then silence. And in that silence, still spinning, still whispering, the fates are weaving the next thread. Maybe it's yours, or maybe it's another life entirely, waiting centuries from now when our own cities have crumbled and the machines have gone quiet. Maybe then someone will dig through the ruins of glass and steel and find what we left behind: a coin, a note, a chipped mug, a cracked screen, and they'll wonder who we were. They'll see the same pattern we've been weaving since the beginning, the same rhythm, the same hunger for meaning. They'll see how we built our towers like mountains to challenge the gods we no longer believed in. How we filled our streets with noise so we wouldn't have to hear the silence beneath it. How we still chased fire, just in newer shapes, the spark of electricity, the glow of a phone, the burning of ambition that never really changes. The gods of our age don't live on mountains. They live in glass towers. They don't hurl thunderbolts. They send signals. But they're just as vain, just as human, and just as temporary. And maybe that's the point the ancients were trying to tell us all along, that divinity isn't some unreachable perfection. It's the echo of our own desires. Zeus wanted control. Hera wanted justice. Athena wanted reason. Poseidon wanted recognition. They weren't gods because they were flawless. They were gods because they were us, magnified and immortalized in story. The myths were mirrors, not sermons. Every time a mortal built a temple, they weren't just worshipping, they were documenting themselves, carving their fears and hopes into stone so the sky wouldn't forget. Maybe that's what we're doing too. Every photograph, every post, every story we tell, all of it is a modern offering to the same hunger to leave something behind, to whisper into eternity. We were here. The storyteller's voice slows, lower now, softer, like the last pages of an ancient manuscript being turned by candlelight. Think of the roads that still stretch across Europe. The stones are worn smooth by millions of footsteps, but they're still there. Farmers still walk them. Tourists still follow them. The empire is gone, but its bones still guide the living. History isn't behind us. It's beneath us. And maybe, if the earth were to split open again, You'd see it all layered together, myth on ruin, ruin on city, city on dream. 1,000 stories, stacked like the rings of a tree, each one telling the same truth in a different voice. That creation never ends, it only changes hands. Picture this. A moonlit night over what was once the Roman Forum. The columns rise like the ribs of a great creature long dead. The marble glows silver, the air still except for the rustle of leaves pushing through cracks in the stone. Somewhere a stray cat prowls where senators once debated the fate of nations. A wind passes, dust stirs. For a heartbeat it almost sounds like voices faint, half-remembered Latin drifting through the ruins. You can't make out the words, but you understand them anyway. It's the same language the fates always speak. Life, loss, life again. The same rhythm that began when Gaia first breathed beneath the stars. You could stop the story there with silence, with ruin, but that would be untrue, because the story never stops. It shifts. Somewhere far away, a temple bell rings. Somewhere else, a mother hums to a newborn. A writer scratches a line in a notebook, not realizing it will outlive them. A worker lays a brick in a city that hasn't been named yet. These are the new myths being written quietly, without the need for thunder or prophecy. We don't need Olympus anymore to make sense of the world. We only need each other. The narrator exhales, as though the weight of all those centuries has settled at last. What started with chaos ended with connection. What began as legend became memory, and memory, that fragile, glowing ember, became the light we still follow. Because maybe the gods were never meant to rule us. Maybe they were meant to remind us that every world, no matter how powerful, begins the same way in the dark, and that every spark, no matter how small, can remake it. So if you're still awake, listening to this, let it fade for a moment. Let the noise of the modern world fall away. Hear only the faintest echo, the forge of Hephaestus, the thunder of Zeus, the whisper of the Roman wind through stone. It's all still there, always has been, waiting for someone to remember. And if you do, if you remember even a fragment, then the story lives again. The myths don't belong to the past. They belong to the act of remembering. Every retelling, every breath, every quiet night like this one brings them back. So rest now. Let the fires of Olympus cool. Let the roar of the Colosseum fade. Let the city sleep. Because tomorrow, someone else will wake, pick up a stone, tell a story, light a small flame, and start the world all over again. And maybe, if you listen carefully, you'll hear the same words carried on the wind that have never really stopped since the dawn of everything. We were here, and so are you.